Welcome to New Hampshire Politics with John Burt. I'm John Burt, and I want to thank you for joining me today. And our guest is a very good friend of mine, and his name is Representative George Lambert, and he's a candidate for the New Hampshire governor in 2014. George, I just can't thank you for coming on.
Oh, it's really my pleasure.
Yeah. No, you've been a representative about the same time I have. Isn't this your second term?
It is.
Yeah, and I think we've had a lot of fun up there.
Yeah, you learn a lot very quickly.
Oh yes, yeah. No, we've made some good, especially the past 2 years. I think you and I and there's a group of us up there that really made a huge difference. We got some good legislation through, and
we did.
And what was surprising was how most reps, when you're brand new, what I was told. When you're a freshman, shut up and sit in the back and do as you're told.
Yeah.
Well, we kind of broke that mold.
And the results were fantastic.
It was.
Yeah.
We did very well for the state of New Hampshire and its people.
Yeah. There's this idea in government that is, it's working just fine.
Yes.
And I'm so scared every time I have people tell me it's working fine, because the more you get into it and understand it, the more it isn't. And then you have the people, they say, you get newly elected, you sit in the back and you watch and see how it all works. And then those people get indoctrinated. I watch great candidates, I watch great people get elected.
Yes.
And then they come into the car wash and then they get taught the language. And they lose the things that they told people they were running about.
Yeah, I did see a lot of that, and that's disheartening.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Thank you, my friend, because you and I, we're not that.
No. Well, there's quite a few of us that didn't drink the Kool-Aid.
Oh, yeah.
Because for some reason, Washington, they must got good tasting Kool-Aid, because they get down there and they just drink it as best they can, as fast as they can.
Well, you know what I found out about running for Congress?
What's that?
I went down to Washington, right? Once you start running to run for office at a state
Yes.
at a state level, or to run for national office, okay? Before you can do that, you need to commit to 3 hours a day, picking up the phone, asking for money.
Yeah.
And unless you're willing to do that, you're not going to be a good candidate.
Yeah.
And then you get elected. And then you know what you have to do when you get down there?
What's that?
You spend 3 hours a day picking up the phone and asking for money.
Yeah.
No, you just never stop. And so what happens is that I think they serve you the Kool-Aid with your morning call sheet. The reality is politics has become so much about the money. We have lost the reason and vision and execution. We need to get special interests out of the entire process. We need to make it so that you stop calling and asking for money so that you can go out and get things done.
I agree with that, but how do you do it?
Well, I have an idea and I have a plan. And that is to make it so that the people who are in charge understand, they took an oath, right? The government as it exists is supposedly guided by the Constitution, which I'm a big fan of. I mean, I can quote it.
Yeah.
And Article 7 of the New Hampshire Constitution says we cannot delegate any power to the United States of America in Congress assembled.
Yeah.
We can't. We constitutionally prohibited. Every one of us who takes an oath of office to actually run for, who actually runs and gets elected to as a member of the House or the Senate or the governor, goes out and says, we swear to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of New Hampshire.
Yeah.
So, when you start looking at that combination, what we can do is actually limited. It's time to get back to that. And you and I fought for that, and I fought really hard for it. I sponsored more pro-liberty legislation myself than any other member of the House.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, it was a long list. And when you look at the last 3 years, I actually won some of it. We took broad-based rulemaking authority off the table, completely gone. So departments no longer have the ability to go and pass rules with the force and effect of law without actually going back to the legislature. There's some things they can do that specific powers delegated.
Yes.
But we went out and deleted this broad language that said, and any other things necessary for the proper implementation of this statute, because they were going out and getting crazy.
Oh, they were.
And we ended up with this problem, which was departments that were both judge, jury, and punishing authority. So they were setting the rules, they were enforcing the rules, they were arbiter of the rules, they were governments unto themselves. and you give those guys control over your food supply. You give them the control over your power. You give them control over your internet access. You give them control over anything you delegate to them, and it gets out of control. I mean, my favorite is Department of Energy. Department of Energy, formed by the United States government, was a committee to find out how to reduce the cost of gasoline for cars. Look what they've become.
Yes, yeah.
And then you keep looking at the larger and larger circles, and you find out the Food and Drug Administration wasn't intended to do what it's doing now. And now they have corrupted the entire process for making sure that Americans are healthy and safe.
Yeah.
I don't mean to get off on a rant, but
Well,
the inertia is the problem.
Yeah.
So we need to stop it.
Yeah.
And there's a really interesting way. What occurred to me is I was out trying to raise money for the House Republican Alliance.
Yep.
A good organization. They recruit and train candidates. And I'm out trying to run a fundraiser, trying to help them raise money, do some training, to teach people what you and I learned. Because I think we were very effective, and I think if we take that training and we bring it to new candidates, it'd be great.
Yes.
And I'm out trying to raise money for that, and people going, well, why aren't you running for governor? And I'm like, yeah, right. And I just keep, it's this joke, right? And I'm, you keep hearing it. You go, why are people saying that? And you hear this from a bunch of people, and I go, huh, that's funny. So I sent an email out to 10 people. I go, why are people saying this? And one of them goes out and posts an email, a message in the Free State Project forum.
Yeah.
One of them was a Free Stater. And he goes, this is George Lambert thinking of running for governor.
Huh.
The Democrats run a fundraiser against me saying Bill O'Brien's lieutenant considering a run for governor, and put out a press release against me the next morning, and the press is calling me. And this goes from why are people saying this to me, to the press is calling saying, who are you and why do you think you could be the governor? Now, the press and all these people, the gossip is everywhere. I got polls that say that I can't win, nobody's ever heard of me, my dog will do a better job.
Yeah.
Then there are other people out there saying, George Lambert's the face that can do it because he actually will bring constitutionally accountable government. Look at his results and track record. He's a guy who goes out, builds coalitions, and gets results. So there are two different factions out there. Which of them are right? I don't know. But, there's one thing that I hear every single time. I say to somebody, I'm thinking about running for governor. And that's this. If you get the job, you could do the job better than it's been done since Mel Thompson.
Yes, yeah.
Because you understand the rule, role, and law. One of the guys who was thinking about running for governor came up and he said to me, he says, you can't be the governor. He says, you haven't even lived in the state long enough. What? I go,
What's the requirement?
7 years. So I went to first grade in West Stewartstown. That's all the way up on the Vermont-Canadian border.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's way up there.
Yeah. I said I went to second and third grade in Manchester. I graduated from Pelham High. Up here, you draw a line straight from one end of the state to the other.
And you're a selectman now.
6 years. Actually,
in Litchfield, right?
Actually, I didn't win my last election.
Oh.
I was kind of busy and looking at trying to make sure that we could win the House back, because I was really concerned after the last election.
Yeah.
And so I put my name on the ballot. I didn't buy a single sign, didn't do anything except for go to candidates night. And at candidates night, I said, I spent 6 years doing this, and I would like it if all of you guys did one thing. Thank everybody who's got their name up here on the ballot, because it takes, it takes all kinds of work to put your name on a ballot and to get it out and even try. Never mind lead. People are going to throw eggs at you the whole bit.
Yeah.
And in a big race, I lost by a few votes. If you read the National Telegraph, they'll tell you that the people chose to kick me out. I'm the only person who didn't spend a nickel on a campaign, and I lost by a few votes.
Yeah.
And I let everyone else fight it out. I'm like, I have bigger fish to fry. The people of Litchfield have come to me and said, hey, would you consider running for selectman next term? I may actually put my name in just to help them because they've had some challenges this year.
Yeah.
But what I realized is this. Leaders matter. Leaders bring integrity to organizations when they're at the top.
Yes, yep.
Max Dupree was the president of Herman Miller. Most people don't even know who he was. They made the chair that changed what it meant to work in an office. It was called the Aeron chair. First time I sat at one, it was $1,200. I said, what kind of idiot spends $1,200 on a chair? And then the salesman said to me, the kind that actually has to sit in it for 7 hours a day. I'm going, he says, you sit in this chair for a week. He says, your back will stop hurting. They're expensive to make. He says, a regular chair is, $300, $400. He says, our chairs are more.
Yeah.
He says, but they're mesh and they adjust and they're just your height. So, that arm, and I'm going, yeah, it's $1,200. And this was back in '95.
Yeah, yeah.
And I go, and then I sat in one for a week. I'm going, wow, that's pretty neat. That company had this idea for a vision, which is we're going to make the best office furniture in the world. Max Dupree won the Business Innovation Award. He was inducted into the Business Hall of Fame. The same year, another guy who was an innovator named Steve Jobs was inducted into the Business Hall of Fame because his product and company had such a vision for customer touch, had such a vision for execution, and such a vision for leadership that they said they were going to change the world.
Yeah.
Okay? And everyone said, you're crazy and you can't do that. I mean, they told Steve Jobs, he started Apple, and they said he wasn't running it well. They brought in John Scully, and things didn't go so well. They got into a fight and they kicked out Jobs. He went out, started another company, made it big. Started another company, made that one big too. He came back. When he came back, he brought with him this idea of the vision of the company, and it gave me this feeling that leaders inspire the people who work for them. And the reason that actually matters in the question of a governor is the governor sets the tone for all of the state employees and every point of contact and touch, from the corner office to the DMV.
It does.
What happens when everyone in the state knows there's a phone number you can call where you have a friend in the governor's office where you say, I got a problem. And the government isn't doing what it's supposed to do. Who should we call and what do we do about it? And get that reporting to happen.
Yeah. And would it matter who they were?
No.
What party or anything?
Nothing. I'll tell you why.
Because it does now.
I know it does.
And it has in the past. I'm not just saying Democrats or hold this, but it happens on the Republican side.
Of course. Let me tell you what I learned about being when I became a state rep. It's the funniest thing. Somebody said to me, if you win, people will answer your phone calls. What? And it was true. I'd been a selectman, so I realized I had had a couple of years of people answering my phone calls, but nothing like when I became a state rep.
Yeah.
And so I'm a justice of the peace. And I actually had somebody say to me, they needed a document. Just a young man had come to live with his grandmother, who was in a wheelchair. And so she couldn't get out for the letter to say he lived in Nashua. So I went over to their house, and I looked at her ID and the whole thing, and I wrote this. I signed the letter that says he lives here as justice of the peace, so he could go get his driver's license to get a job.
Oh, yeah.
He took the letter that I wrote to the DMV, and they said, we won't take it. There's no stamp.
Oh.
I'm a justice of the peace. I'm sworn officer by the governor. That means I don't need a stamp.
But DMV wants the
DMV wanted the stamp, and so
yeah.
So I make a phone call. I mean, they call me and they say, what are you going to do about this? And I said, well, no, tell them they have to take it. So I'm talking to this lady, and she's got her cell phone, and they're going, we're not going to. And I said, well, ask her who she is. And she says, I don't have to tell you. I says, well, you tell her under RSA 91A, she must tell you who she is. And the lady says that. She says, no, I don't. And I said, you hold on just a minute. I'll get back to you. And I pick up the phone and I call Earl Sweeney. He's the Deputy Director of the Department of Safety. And I go, hey, Earl, help me out here. Here's what you do. I sent this letter. I'm a justice of the peace. They're saying they won't take it without a stamp. He says, justice of the peace doesn't need a stamp. I said, I know that, and you know that, but they don't seem to know that. Well, he said, who'd you talk to? And I said, this is where this story is really funny. They won't tell me. He says, we have a phone number for that. He says, we have somebody you could talk to that'll sort this right out. I said, that's great.
Yeah.
He says, I'll make a phone call and I'll tell these people over here, you give this phone number to those people down there and we'll sort it out. 20 minutes later, that guy left with a driver's license.
Yeah.
But for some reason, the person who was on the other side of that counter had decided they knew more about the role of government and the authority of government than the people in charge, and there was no way for the common citizen to get to the people and say, hey, you forgot who you're working for.
Yes. Yeah.
We need that image in the corner office. I want everyone to know that we can fix that. And the way we'll fix it is this. If I become the governor of the state of New Hampshire, on the first day, by the time that I have been done being sworn in, there'll be someone answering the phones in the governor's office. There'll be a department. You know, there's a department in the annex, which is the office of the governor's office?
Yes.
It's in the annex. And you know what they do? Had you ever been in there?
Oh, yeah, I once, yeah.
Yeah, I went there. I asked them what they did. They couldn't tell me. And I said, no, tell me what you do. This is what we answer email. I said, how do you do that? So we get an email. We'll send you back a letter. We'll get you an answer within 30 days about how to route your email. And then they take invitations for the governor to go to places, and they send out certificates and like letters and try to deal with the governor's schedule. You know what? Let's be honest. I don't care about the governor's schedule.
Yeah.
I care about me. I care about why I can't get service at the DMV. I want to know why we have police officers who are going out and saying, we're going to charge you for XYZ as state police officers who aren't doing their job, because they're arresting people sometimes, and then going, oh, we're sorry. That happened in Manchester with city police a few weeks ago. They arrested, or they wrote somebody a ticket. They just made some stuff up. You know what happens when you actually have somebody who knows what they're doing challenge that? It goes away. Well, what happens when the guy who's saying, are we really doing our business, is at the top? The whole thing will change.
Yeah.
When one guy says, we're going to do it right, or we're not going to do it, we'll re-empower America. We might actually create an image that will make it reasonable to be Americans in the 2016 presidential election. Because we'll say this is the model. When people are here looking at how we do it in New Hampshire, they'll see integrity in the system from the top down. Now, I don't know about you, but I was at the state prison the other day. I don't know, you ever been there?
No, I do want to take a tour.
I did. I just went, I listened to the inmates the other day. Nobody running for office ever goes to talk to the inmates. They can't vote.
Yeah.
But somebody said 10 years ago we had model prisons. And today we don't. Because the first place you can take money from is the prisons, because none of those people vote.
Yeah.
So we went from a model prison system with limited problems, according to the research that those guys had, to almost all the programs are shut down. We have they just lost the people who are doing the auto body job rehabilitation and the auto rehabilitation program. They lost the person who was doing the job. So the inmates who are sitting around waiting for the governor to sign a work request so they can hire a teacher so they can keep these people from doing other things. Now what they do is they play cards, and they figured out that with lighting cords they could actually split them apart and shock each other. I'm not kidding. This is the story they're telling me the other day. I'm going, wow, we need to change. Right now, most people think, you know what, there's nothing we can do about the government. They're just the government.
Yeah, I mean, it's so huge.
What happens if you give them the keys back and let them know they can pick up the phone and say, I have a problem?
Yes, yeah.
You'd think that the worst thing that was ever going to happen is you're going to get too many phone calls. The reality is that the phone calls will sort themselves out very quickly into finding the largest and most systemic problems. The largest and most systemic problems will be able to be easily identified. According to the Goldratt theory of constraints, which is done by the Avram Goldratt Institute, you can go out and start looking at large systems. You find the largest problems, you go fix them most quickly. Those guys using that model were able to go out and build a house with Habitat for Humanity in under 5 hours.
Wow.
I'm not talking, so they spent a year planning and getting all their ducks in a row. But you know what? The garage they're trying to put on my neighbor's house, they've been working on since March. Okay? It takes a long time.
Yeah.
How is it you could actually go from a foundation to a completed house in 5.5 hours? Better planning, better execution, better expectations. The Avram Goldratt Institute told me when I was doing some of their reading, learning, and courseware, you get whatever it is you measure. You want better results? Measure better. So let's start measuring whether or not we're doing the people's business. If you want to actually have a government that does the people's business, measure whether or not you are.
Yeah, yeah.
If you start there, we'll at least have an indicator. Right now we're driving around with, it's like we're driving in reverse. We're doing a race, and the speedometer is saying you're at 0 because you're going backwards. We don't know. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, no, it's true. So the people over in the annex that works for the governor, they're going to work for the people.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be amazing?
That would be.
We're going to have a call center, and they're going to route phone calls. They're going to, if they don't know where to go, they're going to sit there and they're going to call. They're going to route a call over to a department head and say, what are you going to do? Where do we go?
Yeah.
And we're going to do what they call in business, drop the penny. If I need to go and solve a business problem, HP, one of the largest computer companies in the world, when Carly Fiorentino was in charge, she had this thing called the Office of the President. You could literally call up anytime you wanted. You ask for the office of the president. If you couldn't get anyone to solve your problems. You know how people ask for the manager?
Yes.
You ever asked for the manager on the phone
Yeah.
and they give you the runaround?
Yeah.
HP said, you call and ask for the office of the president. You call them. You say, this is my problem. And they will assign a caseworker to you, and they will stay with you until it's fixed.
Yeah.
They will follow up.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
changes the climate. Now, when we can bring that kind of leadership, Steve Jobs and Max Dupree leadership, into the corner office of a state, one of the largest employers in the state, and the people who actually set the direction, and we go out and say to the people who are running businesses around the country, you want a place where the government's not going to get in your way, where we're going to incentivize the training and availability of employees. We're going to get government regulators to stop hassling you, and we're going to make it so that you can compete in a better way than anywhere in the country.
Yeah.
We're going to bring jobs. We're going to bring people. We're going to bring pride. We are going to bring success into New Hampshire. Because at 26 years old, most people move out of state. There are no good jobs. The largest employers in the state in terms of growth are Walmart. Okay? Let me ask you, how many people do you know who are going to retire on a Walmart salary and sit there and enjoy fishing off of their yacht?
Yeah.
None.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's not the retirement that American Express tells you need to have when they're talking about dream big, right? They told my dad's generation, you need to go out and save, you need to go out and plan, and then you need to go out and have a spectacular retirement.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't have a workforce in New Hampshire that inspires that. We have one of the most expensive educational systems in the country, and yet we have people who are coming out of our colleges who can't get a job. 4 years, and you can't get a job.
That's right.
What do
Well,
you do?
one bill we did pass, which I have heard from businesses, and I know you voted for it, is the one that said the Department of Labor, when they went out and started finding people for small infractions, they had to warn them.
Yes, there's a small.
Were you a sponsor on the bill?
I was not. Actually, I was one of the people who spoke in favor of it.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I'm surprised you're not a sponsor.
I missed that one, but I spoke in favor of it. I talked to a guy from Nashua who was running a company which is called ErgoSoft US.
Yeah.
And he showed me a letter he got from the state. He called the state to make sure he was in compliance with all the things he needed. He's a small business owner, he had 2 employees. And he needed workman's compensation insurance and then something else. And there were 2 things that sounded very similar, and he only had one of them. And he said, well, how do I buy that from you? And I said, you don't, you go to your insurance company. So he calls them up, and he goes to the insurance company and says, hi, I need this. And they say, okay, we'll get you all set up. And they faxed over this compliance form to the state. And then the state gets the form, and it's all reported, and he's all in good shape. Now, this guy self-complied. He did his work. He made sure he checked off all the boxes.
Yeah.
When the state got the paperwork, they went out and sent him a fine for $147,000 for being in non-compliance for a year. Nothing happened. Everything was all there. The guy was attempting to be in self-compliance. And he got a fine for $147,000. Now, I know that because the day I went for the hearing, I had copies of this letter. And we had this guy from the Department of Labor who was going, I've heard about those things. I've never seen anybody actually get it. That's all just talk.
Yeah.
And you know how we're supposed to be respectful. You know how we're supposed to sit down in the chair and go, hi, I'm Representative Lambert from Litchfield, and I'm here today because I had a stack of copies of this thing. I walked over. Man, I've never felt more like I was on a game show in my entire life. And I just go, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I would love to sit down and be official, but you have got to see this. And I'm handing it out. I'm going, this guy says it doesn't happen. Here's the fine. Like, here it is. Come on.
What did they do?
Everyone's like looking at me like I have 2 heads. And the guy says, I'd like to see a copy of that. And I said, I'd like you to see a copy. It has to stop.
Yeah.
That's why we have to pass this bill. Yeah, and we did. The good news is that the guy who's trying to come into compliance has an opportunity to do so. We need to go and do that at every touch point in government.
Yeah.
We need to do that with your fishing license. We need to go and say, you know what? You want to fish, catch, and release today? That's fine. But you catch a fish and you keep it. You don't have a license, get on your smartphone and go buy one.
That's right.
Why not? You know, the question is not about whether or not you should have to be able to pay someone to fish. It's whether or not you need to pay someone for the king's fish or the king's deer.
Yeah.
The argument is, do I pay the fine to do this? Right now, a game warden who shows up because you're illegally fishing can actually take your truck.
Yeah, yeah, today, yeah.
They give you a fine, or they can. My brother told me that. I'm like, yeah, right. He's like, no, he says they'll take everything you got. What? He says, yeah, that's the way they make sure that they prohibit poaching. They don't want it. Poaching. I think we've sort of missed the point somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
Because it's the people's land.
Yeah.
It's the people's deer. The king, we got rid of him at a tea party in 1775.
Yeah. Now, what other pro-business can you bring? Because business is huge in New Hampshire, and we've got to attract new business.
I mean, you want to get crazy? I mean, really, really crazy? If you're in the legislature and I become the governor, you submit this bill, and I will pack the state in 9 months. You pass the following. You pass exclusive to New Hampshire, okay? A bill that goes out and says it made in New Hampshire, sold in New Hampshire, not subject to any federal regulations, and I will turn New Hampshire into the Singapore of the American continents. And I'll do that in 9 months.
And we can do it.
We can. Texas did it. Texas had a bill.
And they're the number one growth state right now.
Texas had a law. They repealed this. They had a law that said made in Texas, sold in Texas, not subject to federal regulation. They cured cancer. I'm not kidding you. You can look that up. There's a guy down there who fought the FDA. And there's a movie. You can go look at it on Netflix. It's Dr. Brzezinski. He got charged by the FDA for failure to file their procedures. They tried to put him in jail. They didn't say his cancer treatment didn't work. They didn't say who was scamming people. What they said is that he was not allowed to do it under their procedure. He'd been doing it, cured cancer in the 70s. The FDA, strong-armed the Texas legislature to repeal the Made in Texas law that gave him the exception so that he could actually run his business in Texas. He's now actually, when they repealed that, is now operating under a different FDA exemption, waiting for the phase 3 clinical trials of his cure for cancer. But he's not the only one. There's another guy, paper written in Duke University 2 years ago, just before the breast cancer walk, okay, that went out and said, there's this guy who's come up with a cure for cancer. It's injectable. They're curing cancer in mice for something like breast cancer in mice. And that's great. It's wonderful news. Everyone's all excited. Except for it'll cost them over $1 billion to go out and do the clinical trials so that they can actually turn it into a real product. Because that's the hurdles for the FDA. And there's not enough money in it, because what you do is you take an industry that, cancer treatment costs millions and millions of dollars. People go broke on it. And you go out and you say, by the way, I can cure that with an injection and you'll be done in 2 weeks. It changes the entire dynamic because nobody will ever pay enough money. Leukemia, same thing, Rhode Island. You can go look this stuff up. This is not me. This is actual peer-reviewed science. And we can't have conversations about it because the FDA says we can talk about the science, but you can't license it, you can't buy it, you can't sell it, and it won't be it'll be more than a decade before anyone can use any of these things. If there's a cure for cancer today, which there potentially is, and you are about to die in the next 3 years, you're going to die no matter what, because you can't have it. I want to say, it's your money and your risk. If you consent to that risk, come here. Vacation here. Go home without cancer if that's possible. Because they're doing that in Canada now. There's a treatment center in Canada that is that will allow you to do experimental cancer treatments. You can go to Mexico. You can go to all over the place. What you can't do is you can't go to a civilized state, which is part of the United States, and say, with our infrastructure, with all of our training, with all of our schools, with all of the other stuff, let's have a shot. Now, if you want to go out and say, really, you want to change the entire nation of the entire dynamic of the state, go out and say, you know what? We want to have freedom for you to do business so that you, if you want to, can go out and tap a maple tree, drain the sap, boil it, put it into a container, and sell it in your front yard. Now, you can't right now because the federal government says, we're going to regulate you on that. There's a new bill that has, under administrative rules by the Department of Agriculture, that is going out and saying you can't go out and sell food unless you comply with all of these rules that are going to make pick your own fruits and vegetables illegal in New Hampshire. Within the next 5 years, pick your own will be gone. Do you like to pick your own apples? Because I do. Yeah. Well, then you better go and buy an apple tree. Because you're not going to be able to run that business and sell the apples. You'll either have to do one or the other. Businesses won't be able to sustain it. See, the federal government has gotten so into protecting you, they forgot what their job is.
Well, so how does the corner office encourage the representatives and senators to pass bills to stop the federal government from coming in?
All they need to do is pass one. If they pass, made it exclusive to New Hampshire, under Article 7, And under Article 3 of the New Hampshire Constitution, Part 1st,
Yeah.
that's pretty close to a done deal. However, here's the funny part. Part 2nd, Article 41, says the governor is the supreme executive magistrate. His job is to administer all of the state departments and to comply with the state and federal constitutions, which include directing the Attorney General. And the Attorney General will file a lawsuit on behalf of the state of New Hampshire to say you are no longer going to try to comply with terms that we did not agree to. Under Article 7 of the New Hampshire Constitution, we could not and never had the authority to consent to any of this stuff you're talking about.
Yes.
It never existed.
Yeah.
And you know what? Let's take that to the Supreme Court, because I'm willing to stare them down. I'm willing to spend the money. And in the meantime, we will create so much technology, so much innovation, and so much momentum, they can't stop us.
Yeah.
It's a vision. It's a lot. But you know what? That's a vision like Steve Jobs. That's a vision like Max Dupree. That's a vision that goes out and says, we're no longer going to accept the status quo. We're going to define the result that will make a difference. And people who don't know me are going to go, that guy's crazy. But those people didn't see me table a whole bunch of Senate bills when we were in the House.
Yes.
And actually
Yeah.
learn the process and learn the lynch points and actually figure out what it takes to make a difference. You can't fight all the battles. What you need to do is find out the place where you can put the smallest amount of energy to get the maximum result, and then do that. I've been thinking about it. I have a plan, and I'm going to work with people like you, and we're going to go out and pass it. Now, John, do me a favor. Why don't you plan next year to join me in getting in a competitive race? Let's think about you going and helping find some people like you, and let's go put those people in the Senate.
Yeah.
Let's go and create some accountability, and let's make New Hampshire really as great as it could be.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, isn't that a vision worth having?
It is.
It's possible.
Because, you know, we can pass some good stuff out of the House.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the drawback has been, you know, kind of a roadblock over to the Senate.
You know why?
But this year they did well. I mean, I do have to take my hat off to them. But
13,000 pages of legislation. Well, let me tell you how bad it is. Do you know that you, if you're a restaurant owner, cannot put a bowl of sugar out on your table and let people serve themselves from it?
really, I did not know that.
I'm having this conversation with J.R. Hole the other day. He's going, you just sponsored a bill. Sugar packets. What are you thinking? And hold on, I'm checking to see, do I have one? No, I don't. No, in this jacket? No, I do have a, I don't have it, but sugar packets. You are required since 1971 to have individually wrapped sugar packets or a sugar bowl that has no opening greater than 3/8 of an inch.
Who came up with that?
I called Legislative Services and said I wanted to repeal it. And she's laughing at me. She's going, you know, nobody would pass a law. That's stupid.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's her response. She was literally laughing at me on the phone. I'm not allowed to say who said it. She was laughing at me.
Yeah.
And I'm going, but it's there. And she's going, you've got to have this wrong. And she searches for it. She finds it. I go, we're going to repeal that. And here's the deal. We're going to pass it, and we're going to repeal it. And then I'm going to prove it's possible. Or we're going to let the Democrats go out and say, you know what? We don't need to repeal it. And let them show us that they'll just keep bad laws on the books. But we need to make it simple. We need to start somewhere.
Yeah.
We need to prune it. We need to ask the question, what is the business of government? Part first, Article 1 of the New Hampshire Constitution says all government is formed in consent. Part 2 says that all governments Article 1 says all governments are formed in consent. Article 2, Part 1st says that we surrender up some of our natural rights for the protection of others.
Yes.
Part 3 says when the surrender, when we do not receive equal protection for the surrender of those rights, the surrender is void. So I asked Legislative Services this year, how do you execute that? I want to go and execute the surrender is void portion. And they said, we're not sure you can. And I said, great, let's put in a bill this year, this term, to do that. Show me how you execute that. And they said, we don't think it's constitutionally possible. I said, well, it's in the Constitution now.
Yeah.
They said, well, it might require a constitutional amendment. I said, well, good, I'll submit one of those too. So I'm ready to have the discussion about what it takes to actually sit there and ask the question, what is the role of government? Because the inertia for government regulation and control is so large, and the federal government of the United States has become so what we were opposed to when I was a kid, that now the president of the Soviet Union is doing a better job of protecting Americans than the president of the United States. There is something wrong there. It is time for us to actually roll back and say, what are we doing? What did we mean when we filed the Declaration of Independence that said we're going to be independent? Now, I've seen you fight on the floor. I've seen you go up and go, Madam Speaker, and just ask a simple question and change it.
Yeah.
I have a question for the people of New Hampshire, and that is, would you like your government back?
I would say yes.
Would you like that government to know that it's a customer service business and you're the customer?
I would love to see that.
Would you like to be able to call the complaints department and say, let's fix it?
I would love to have a complaints department. That's why I like what you're saying.
I think it's possible.
Yeah.
I think you get what you measure.
Yeah.
And it's time. Now, everyone says, but there are all these good laws. There's a book out. You want to get scared? Read it. It's called 3 Felonies a Day. It goes out and describes the fact that the average American goes out and commits 3 felonies they don't even know about.
Oh.
We have 13,000 pages of law just in New Hampshire. We have millions of pages at the national level that you don't even know about.
Yeah.
And the issue is not whether or not the law makes sense or is applicable to you. It's whether or not somebody decides they're going to throw something at you today. And that's got to stop. The idea that the government is supposed to oppress you is not why we're here. That's not why I ran. It's not why I go up to Concord. I have tried to do more repeal than anyone else. And we're going to go out and put somebody in the corner office if I get elected that's going to say, the accountability starts here and stops here.
Yeah.
The governor is responsible for the enforcement of the New Hampshire Constitution, and Article 3 of the New Hampshire Constitution says that when the surrender is not equal, it's void and invalid. When the protections don't apply to you, you shouldn't be suffering.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
time to actually go and ask our department heads, our enforcement people, our government, are we getting what we're supposed to be getting?
Now, if there's which I don't think there would be too much, but there'll be some resistance.
Oh, I'm sure.
How do you handle that?
Well, the resistance is fear. I'm not suggesting that we actually fire all the policemen, get rid of all the fire departments. Now I'm just saying, let's talk about how we enforce compliance. Let's talk about speeding.
Yeah.
Everyone goes, well, if you reduce speed limits, if you raise speed limits, we'll lose federal funding. Have you heard that before?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The federal government, in 1995, actually stopped doing that. They stopped removing your federal funding for increasing speed limits. A lot of other states have increased their speed limit. But you have all these people in the legislature who've heard that before, so they know it. And so there's this inertia up there to go, no, we can't do that.
Yes.
I have to tell you a story because this is my favorite. What I've learned about being in the legislature is this. They did this, I've been told, this might not have actually happened. There was a social experiment where they put a whole bunch of monkeys in a cage, and then they hung a banana. And whenever a monkey reached up and grabbed the banana, they sprayed all the monkeys. Okay? And then, didn't take long for whenever a monkey reached for the banana, all of the monkeys would actually keep the other guy from grabbing the banana. And then, they start cycling out the monkeys. And they keep doing that until none of the monkeys that have ever been sprayed are in the cage. Like, none of the original monkeys are still left in there.
Yeah.
Okay? And every time somebody reaches for the banana, all the other monkeys try to stop them. But nobody knows why. This is the nature of government.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? We're all told what we can and can't do, but nobody can justify why. Nobody can actually back it up.
Yeah.
I'm the guy who's going to go and say, why not? Let's ask. Let's check. Yeah. Let's check the playbook. Because I carry one playbook, and that is the Constitution of the state of New Hampshire. And that goes out and tells us what we can and can't do. Now, if there's one guy who's responsible, there's one guy who has the power, and there's one guy who can pick up the phone and say, let's write a memo, send it to the Supreme Court, and ask them whether or not a law is constitutional, you change the game. Because a law passed by the legislature is presumed to be constitutional until challenged at the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Which means that either the state legislature can go and ask the Supreme Court whether or not something is legal, They can ask for an advisory opinion. They can change the law. Or someone can go and challenge a law all the way to the Supreme Court, and that costs about $100,000.
Yeah.
So which way do you want to go?
Yeah.
I think you should be able to go out and say, hi, is this really doing what we need? There are lots of statutes out there that need to go, that need to go out. They need to be finished. And everyone says it's not possible. I know because I sponsored with Laura Jones. There were only 2 sponsors on HB 222 in the 2011 session. HB 222 repealed broad-based rulemaking authority, and when it was done, had multiple pages of repeal.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay, where each line was go and repeal this section. And we have pages of killing language and law that was removing broad-based rulemaking authority. And we covered a lot of it. And they went out and they said the bill is too big, the idea is too grand. And luckily, some people went out and said it's worth doing, and they did it. Dan Itza helped us out. Carol McGuire helped us out. And they went out and did the research, and they talked to the departments. They said, do you really need all this power? And the department said, no, we don't need it. We got rid of it. If we work with the departments and say, collaboratively, how do we execute more accountable government? Once they start, once you get the initial shift going, they're going to like it more. Yeah. Because it's going to make it easier for them to do their jobs. The initial shift is the only hard part.
Yes. Yeah.
Once you get it going, everybody's going to find they do better. I found that in Litchfield. When I got to Litchfield, I went out and said, we're going to answer to the people, we're going to go out and we're going to be accountable. And everyone was like, who is this guy? After 3 years, I had to run again. And there were people saying, he's never going to get reelected. That was not what a majority of the people said, because the majority of the people actually liked this idea that somebody was outgoing and saying, the town government works for us.
Yeah.
And people came to see me. And after, as I said at the beginning, when I got out, they're coming to me now going, can we just have you back? Just your voice, just you being there and able to ask the questions changes the game.
It does.
And that's what you and I are doing in the State House this year. That's what we're going to do next year. Yeah. And if the people of New Hampshire feel empowered and they say, let's put this guy in the corner office, and he asks all of the major department heads, are you doing your job, at the weekly meeting? And what are we going to do with your customer service complaints? It won't take long before the people all the way down to the front line in the DMV know that they're going to follow the law or they're going to answer.
Yes.
And they don't want to hear the person on the other side of that counter saying, do I need to call customer service?
Yes. Yeah.
It changes the power dynamic.
It does. It puts the taxpayer back at being the boss.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah. No, but what you went through in Litchfield, I mean, we're running that in Goffstown right now. You know, and there's a lot of people wanting me to run for selectman because I are, we're a good voice.
The people, I get complaints. We all get complaints. The more vocal you are, the more opposition you're going to get. You know what I find? If someone talks to me, I say, look, this is what you can expect.
Yeah.
I will behave this way. You can call me out anytime you want. Now, you can try to convince me of any of your points, but use this framework. And if you and I see eye to eye, I'll vote with you. If not, I won't. But how much is it going to cost? Is the taxpayer getting value?
Yes.
And are we doing the right thing? Those are the 3 basic questions we're supposed to ask.
Yep.
Do we have the power is number 4.
Yep.
Okay? But the last one, do we have the power? And if we don't, the answer is no. Every single time.
Yeah.
Start there.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, if we don't have the money, we don't have the money. You just can't. Okay? I don't want to tell another one of my neighbors that they have to sell their house because they can't pay their tax bill. But I've had to have that conversation. I'll tell you the worst part about being a selectman is the first day that you take someone's house for taxes. You will never.
I didn't even think of that part.
You will never feel the same.
Yeah. How do you live?
Well, it's actually really easy. The good news is that when you take their house for taxes, then they're your tenant, by the way. They become the liability of everyone in town. No, seriously, because now they're a welfare case.
Yeah.
And then you realize that actually making them a welfare case is a bad idea.
Yeah.
And you find a way to work with them. There's a way. And you use the exemptions in the system. And you go out and realize that the role of government and good leaders is to find a way to keep your society moving forward based on the rules and the consent of the people who are here. Because nobody in your town wants someone who has no ability to pay to lose their house because they didn't pay taxes.
That's right.
What they do want is someone with the ability to pay who's not paying the taxes to pay the taxes or to lose their property.
Yeah.
Okay? There's a difference. It's all based on consent.
Well, we had a former selectman, we had a deliberative session where people actually showed up to this one.
Really?
Oh yeah, I was shocked. We had, a couple hundred people in there, and I'm going, this is the way it should be. Normally, it's just a bunch of town,
The employees and everyone with a stake in the
or
game.
the school.
Yeah.
In 20, John Burt's there. But this
You guys
time,
get 20 John Burts?
well, occasionally.
Congratulations, we get 8.
Yeah. So this guy gets up here and he tells a former selectman, he goes, you listen here. If you keep taxing us to death, what happens if we can't afford to pay our taxes? Well, George, I almost passed out when the selectman, luckily he's gone, but he stood up and he says, I don't care if you pay your taxes or not, sir, because the bank will pay it instead of losing the house. What kind of attitude is that for a government?
It's one that says that they believe they are entitled to your property and will take it.
Yeah.
And you know what bothered me? Somebody came up to me one day and they said, do you realize that taxation is at the point of a gun?
It is. Yeah.
And I said, that's ridiculous. And he says, you follow that path long enough, and sooner or later, when they come to take your property, they're going to do it with guns.
Yep.
Okay? Be as nice as you want, but at the end of the day, taxation is theft at gunpoint.
Yeah.
So we need to think very, very sternly about what that means, about at what point we are willing to take and expend someone else's money. And if we take it, it's our job to use it wisely.
Yes.
Never to waste it.
Yeah.
It's not taking money for taxation that's the problem. It's wasting it and thinking that it doesn't matter to the people you took it from, or that it's not very much. Because you know what? It's not a question of whether or not it's very much to you. It wasn't yours in the first place.
Exactly. Exactly.
When you get that kind of attitude,
Yeah.
and you start looking at what we did in Litchfield, and you apply that to a state, you're going to see wonderful things happen. We went out and said to all of our department heads, all those buckets of money you have, all those, my favorite, being a selectman, you end up looking at budgets. So we have all these budgets, and everybody with a projector, those overhead projectors?
Yes.
Every one of them had money in their budget for a $600 lamp that burns out once every 3 years. But if it burns out, the projector's no good, so we got to have the money for the lamp.
But it's there every year.
It's there every year. And then they move the money to somewhere else.
Yes.
So you know what we said? Oh, that one right there? We're going to take all of those from everywhere, and we're going to put them over here in one place. And then next year, we're going to look at how many of those we spent, and we're going to make sure we have enough to go and replace one. But we're going to stop putting all these little buckets of money. It doesn't sound like much. It's $25 here, $75 there, $300.
Yeah.
Okay? And you go and you shuffle that around, and then you find out that there's tens of thousands of dollars. There's a police cruiser there.
Yeah.
In our town, there was actually a police cruiser every year. And it's like, wow. And so we moved it all. We put it over in the town administrator's budget. And he's responsible for it. We have centralized purchasing on pens and paper.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, instead of all these little buckets of money. Because 1,000 here and 1,000 there. Okay? Adds up to, it doesn't take very often before you get $30,000 there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that will make a difference. You start taking that attitude and you go and apply it to, how much? A $5.5 billion a year budget?
500, yeah, 550 billion. We're 11 billion every 2 years.
Yeah.
Well, but what was funny is when we lowered the budget almost 11%, or a little over 11, I think it was, in the past 2 years, everybody says, "Oh my God, you can't."
There were people dying in the streets. I remember reading. Yeah.
There'll be dead people everywhere.
Yeah.
And everybody survived. This year, it's basically a flat, no increase.
Yeah.
And nobody's complaining.
You know what's funny?
They're surviving.
There's a book called The Richest Man in Babylon. Have you ever read it?
No.
It's short. Buy it on your way home. Like, seriously, I'm telling you, go out to Barnes & Noble and buy it.
Yeah.
It's called The Richest Man in Babylon. And it's about how you actually become wealthy. It's about how you go out and change your mindset. And he says, learn to save. And you will find when you start saving money, when you immediately start paying yourself first, you put money away, you will never, ever, ever feel shorter than you did before.
Yeah.
Because your spending will adjust.
Yeah.
Okay? What you do is you go and, you save as much as you can. Just save it.
Yeah.
And then when you have an emergency, you can deal with it. And the crisis mentality goes away. Because what you need is a bucket of money to deal with an emergency.
Yeah.
And tighter controls.
Yeah.
If you apply that same methodology to project management says if you want a project to take less time, stop padding all of your dates and all of your times.
Yes.
Reduce the amount of time you give to each one.
Yeah.
And then when you slip, you know how much you slip. But the overall could be 1/3 to 1/4 of the original projected time. In software development, we call it agile development, but it's exactly how long it's going to take. Stop padding it and start improving your communication. Because it's all of the expansion, the job will always expand to take the amount of time and money and resources allocated to it. Start with less.
Exactly.
Do everything with less, and you'll find you have more at the end.
Yeah.
We could become a wealthy state. I'm not saying we need to go and fire all of our employees. What I'm saying is we need to better utilize them. Give them things that we should be doing that will actually make a difference, rather than doing things that don't.
Yes. Yeah.
I really think we could change things if we change the mentality. I would rather go out and say we have people who are contributing nothing. Let's go let them read books and write book reports, rather than let them get in the way and cost everybody in the state more hassle and more money.
Yeah, exactly.
Stop pushing paper. We have a court system that is overwhelmed. They tell us, we don't have enough judges, we don't have enough time, it takes too long to try everything. What's the answer? Well, let's start with less crime. Let's start with calling less things crimes.
Yes.
Let's go and remove the burden, because in manufacturing, we all know that you do quality, if you have a limited resource, you do quality assurance before you actually use your most limited resource, so you can actually, you never process bad parts through a limited resource, and you get more productivity, more throughput. Did you know that?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right? I know that, you know that.
Yeah.
Government doesn't even know that.
No, they don't.
Government just goes, oh, we just need to hire more people.
Yeah.
I think we can change it.
Yeah. No, we can.
What?
Well,
I'm sorry.
No, we're just getting toward the end of the show, and I'm hoping, because we have a lot of good topics that we really need to cover, and so I hope you can come back.
Well, anytime. You and I talk about this stuff.
I know.
So often, it's sort of like chatting with an old friend, and I just.
Yeah.
But no, I think this plan is exciting. I think I can help to explain to people that we can do it.
Yeah.
I've grown a couple of hyper-growth companies. There's nothing quite as exciting as actually starting a small software company.
Yes. Yeah.
And having 8 people in a room and going, this is an idea, and you're like, you're all squeezed in for space, and you're just trying to figure it out. And then you don't have enough room, and you have to add a little bit more space, and a little bit more space. And in 4 months, go from 8 people to 100 people.
Yes.
I've done that twice in my career, back to back, 2 years in a row. I did it in 1994, 1995. Then I went out and started my own company, and I built a company. And I have seen that growth and innovation. And it always comes down to resources. It always comes down to how big can you manage.
Yeah.
With the intelligence pool we have in New Hampshire, we could actually change the model of the state and make it efficient, make it affordable, and make it so that it's the pride of our nation. We can become the crown jewel, not just for the presidential primaries, but to take that message to the rest of our nation and say, do you want your country back?
That's right.
And I believe we can have it. That's why I started this Rethink Republican campaign a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
I own rethinkrepublican.com. I have a plan to actually go and put some new polish and some new shine on the gem we call conservatism, which, if you listen to Barry Goldwater, was not about social issues. It was about getting the government out of your life. If we go back and bring Goldwater conservatism to the Republican Party and populate the corner office with a vision that says we're going to go out and do what it takes to have a government that is worth consenting to be governed by,
Yeah.
we'll have an America that people will be proud to stand up and pledge allegiance to.
That's right. And it can all start right here in New Hampshire.
I think we can.
Yeah.
What do you think, John?
I'm on board.
You are?
Yeah, we need to do it.
Perfect. Well,
And,
if you or any of your friends would actually like to support me,
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say. How would people get a hold of you?
Actually, you can go to lambert2014.com.
Okay.
We have a website. It's got YouTube videos. You can actually see what's going on. We're accepting financial contributions from anyone. And we're accepting people to join. Right now, we have an exploratory committee. We're looking for advisors, and we're taking names for advisors. By the time this airs, we're hoping that our advisory panel will be out trying to recruit more supporters for our campaign and put a grassroots network of conservatives on the field across the state.
Great. All right.
Thank you,
Well,
sir.
I really appreciate you coming on, George, and I definitely want you back.
I look forward to coming back, and I look forward to actually following both your campaign and other elections.
Yeah, we'll see. Where I go with the selectman part. But,
So that's are you running in January?
it'll be March here. Yeah, if I do it.
Well, you have to file in January.
Yes. Yeah.
I have some materials for you if you'd like, which is an explanation. You're a Senate Bill 2 town, I presume?
Yes.
Deliberative session? If you'd like, you should take a look at my documents on how your tax bill is constructed and why that matters, how reevaluations work. There's a whole bunch of stuff I wrote in Litchfield that actually was in the newspaper. We have it available on the web.
Yeah.
I taught Kevin Smith how to read his tax bill.
Well, that's what I need then. We'll have to talk after then.
Sounds great.
All right. No, again, George, I really appreciate you coming on. I think you have a good vision, and that's what we need in New Hampshire.
Thank you very much.
All right. And again, this is New Hampshire Politics with John Burt, and we had George Lambert. He is running for governor in 2014. Look him up on the website that he gave, Lambert 2014, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, .com. Yeah, and he's a good candidate. I've seen him on the House floor. You'd be really impressed what you're going to be seeing up in the future of New Hampshire. And until next time, I want to thank you for watching. Have a good day. Bye now.